We've been asking the wrong question about the thing for 40 years. It's not, how do you kill it? It's, if it won, would it even notice? In this video, I want to talk about, would the thing from the famous movie, The Thing by John Carpenter, actually try and take over the world, or would it simply just be trying to survive and escape? I'm going to deep dive into the movies that have inspired me to talk about this, the short novella, and also one of the recent short stories that was written from the perspective of the alien. Hopefully we can get to the bottom of this. The reason I wanted to talk about The Thing is because it is probably my favorite movie of all time. It's also my brother's favorite movie of all time, and one of my father's favorite sci-fi movies, I will say. I don't know what his favorite movie is, but it is a movie I probably watch at least once a year or once every 2 years. It's a movie that my brother and I actually end up talking a lot about because I feel like every time you watch it, you almost have a different theory about what's going on, but we'll get to that later. So what is The Thing? To go back to the beginning, there was originally a short novella written by John W. Campbell, originally published in the year 1938. This short story goes by the name of Who Goes There? Basically, this was the inspiration for the 1950s movie that came after it, which was The Thing from Another World, which in turn inspired John Carpenter's 1980s film, The Thing. And then later on, I think we had a film in 2011 come out that was practical effects, far superior to CGI is all I'm going to say. For those of you who aren't aware of what The Thing is, it is an unidentified alien life form that consumes and reanimates, takes over, replicates, copies, or becomes the biomass of whatever it touches. For instance, this unidentified alien could essentially take over a dog or a cat or humans, which makes me curious to think. I don't know. I mean, obviously the film is set in Antarctica, so who's to know if it couldn't take over stuff like plants? But yeah. Okay, so some things I want to analyze. 1, how does the thing assimilate? So we know by the movie that essentially the thing's alien cells consume and take over the cells of its subject. We see this happen in the computer simulation where the little cells go and then they eat the red cells, and then as they eat them, they turn into them. So we know that that's how the thing assimilates and takes over its host. I want to go into whether we think that the alien itself, is it a consciousness when it's its own entity, or is it kind of like a hive mind?
So you had 3 questions. Is the thing one thing? Why or why not? I'd say the thing it's both. So it's made up of all these little things combined into the larger things. And then when you start breaking it down, like in the blood scene, it becomes more simple and like survival instinct, but I don't think they're all one thing. They're able to act autonomously when, as evidenced by the Palmer thing and the Norris thing, not necessarily working together as far as we could tell, but they seem to be separate entities thinking on their own, especially with the dock off on his own building the spaceship. So I would say they are one thing when it comes to the collective of cells, but not necessarily one thing when it comes to the multiple life forms that are imitating other people. Is its intention to take over or survive? I think it's a simple-minded creature. I only think it's trying to survive. I don't think it has any intentions of overtaking the planet. In terms of, like, it doesn't have a goal. I will assume that it's going to absorb biomass, and that it's going to eventually assimilate all living things, but I don't think it's doing that out of this drive or intention of taking over. I think that's just sort of its survival instinct is just to absorb and assimilate. Is the thing a bioweapon or a cosmic disease of some sort? I do not think that it is a bioweapon. In my opinion, you know, especially with what the prequel brings to the table, and you could argue that the prequel is something completely separate, but I think with the idea of this alien craft crash landed, it wasn't intentionally landed, and whatever the thing was on the ship, like attacking whoever the crew was of the alien ship. I don't think it was a bioweapon. I think it was just something that either these aliens were like taking back to some other place, maybe like science or research, trying to figure out what it is, and it got loose, you know, since it can break down into like singular celled sort of stuff. Maybe a little bit of it was able to attach to one of the alien crew members and start assimilating and taking over. And maybe what we see on the ground at the outpost is exactly what happened on the alien ship. And the alien was like, "Oh, if we're going down, we're going to take the thing with us." And they crash landed, hoping maybe the fire of the wreckage would, you know, burn it off. But I don't think it's a bioweapon. I do think it is some sort of creature that is just trying to survive. It's by nature of what it is. It just seems to be like I don't think it's malicious, although, you know, from our perspective, it seems to be malicious, but I think it's just that's the nature of how it assimilates. It just adapts to its environment, and maybe from what it learned, if you were to take the prequel as happening before, you know, prequel, a lot of complaints that people had was that in the prequel, the thing didn't hide. It wasn't like super deceptive, but it just woke up. It doesn't know what's going on. It hasn't figured it out yet. It's like it doesn't know that maybe hiding is the best thing to do. So that's why in the original John Carpenters, it's a lot more sneaky and reserved, and it tries to assimilate not out in the open, because it learned when it woke up that just attacking willy-nilly was not the way to go about it. So cosmic disease, sure. A potential alien virus that instead of self-replicating through cells, it assimilates that biomass and then converts it into itself. So, hope that answers your questions.
I think that the alien is both a hive mind in the way that it communicates, but we know that it's also just trying to survive. And we know this because each cell acts in a way in which it only cares about its own survival. We see this when they do the blood test in the movie. We're not sure within the confines of the film whether the creature actually feels fear itself, or if it is feeling the fear of its host, if that makes sense. So if the alien is assimilating each part of basically its host, does the alien itself feel the fear, or does it feel the fear that the host would feel in that situation? Does the alien have any identity itself, or is it just the identity of whatever it hosts at that time? Assimilation versus infection. We know that the alien obviously assimilates. It takes over its host and fully takes over basically their being. And in that retrospect, I think that it's definitely an assimilation, obviously, given the context, and I wouldn't call it an infection, because I feel like an infection would act differently, almost like a zombie. An infection almost like removes the central thinking power of the host, where an assimilation, you still have like the brain of the host, but you also have the brain of what we'll call the hive mind of the alien. I believe that this alien does have an intelligence level, and I think that it gathers its intelligence from not only all of its experience traveling throughout the universe, but I think it gathers intelligence in a way where when it takes over its host, it also gathers like the information that its host has. And it can obviously, like we see in the movie, it crashed on Earth. Like it was intelligent enough to have a spacecraft that could travel across the universe. And we see later in the movie that it's intelligent enough to use just random pieces of metal to start putting together another spaceship to essentially like leave. So I would call the alien a very intelligent being. Is it the intelligence of the single cells, or is it the intelligence of the mass? That is kind of the question that I am proposing. With all that being said, if every single cell of the alien is the thing, and they are all trying to survive, what would be the reason, or why would there be any incentive to go towards, I guess, the rest of planet Earth? Would there be more of an incentive to just escape? Because obviously at this point, like, the alien knows that the humans can kill it, can affect it, and that like basically the human spirit is a worthy like opponent to the assimilation. So I'm wondering, like, is it worthy for the alien to, is it better off for the survival of the alien to try and escape? And even if some of it was to escape, could it like also like the alien escapes Earth, but also it leaves itself on Earth to try and do more assimilation? Is it a twofold thing? Can the thing both in part survive by leaving planet Earth, but also survive by its assimilation, right? Because all it takes is essentially one cell of the thing to in turn take over the rest of the biomass of what's around it. Would the thing conquer Earth? I want to think of this in basically three different ways. Number one would be the invader. The invader spreads intentionally, and its whole objective is to try and take over this planet, whether it be basically that the thing is a bioweapon itself and it's trying to take over the planet so that whatever else comes after it is able to live there, maybe terraform it. Maybe its whole goal is to just consume all biomass in the universe. Number two could be a survivor. The thing is simply trying to survive. Its intent isn't wholly malicious, but it's doing whatever it can to survive. Much like, well, a dog in a corner. It's just trying to make its way out, and so the way that we perceive it is it came here to take over everything, and it's obviously killed all these people, but we're not looking at it from the perspective of, well, it's maybe it's killing these people, but maybe it's doing so because, like every other living thing, it's doing its best to survive, and we just see it as killing other people, where the alien, sees it as doing what it can to survive essentially the harshness of the universe. Number three would be the accidental apocalypse. The thing isn't trying to do anything apart from obviously like its survival, but essentially it has no goal. It is like a fungus or a spore or a disease of some sort that is essentially just going to take over intentionally or unintentionally, and so that's what it does. Conquest requires ego in a way. It's intentionally doing it. Survival requires instinct. And then the accident is just nature, essentially. This is just a different type of nature that's foreign to planet Earth. I think the real horror of the whole concept isn't that it's intentional, that it is a survival instinct, but the real horror itself is the fact that the biomass of the thing might not care at all. The terror isn't exactly that it hates us or wants to take over anything, but I think the horror itself is just biological indifference. What if the possibility isn't that humanity is really being taken over per se, but it could also just be being consumed? There is also the horror of the death of identity, where as humans, we are all individualistic, but the thing is an assimilation of a collective hive mind of biomass, and its indifference to the idea of individualism. I think the reason that we think that the thing is here to take over is because we as humans aspire to conquer and take over, like we have taken over much of the world. Like in the movies, we have even not really conquered Antarctica, but we have conquered a place where human life shouldn't exist. And so we assume that the thing itself is here to conquer and take over instead of just being a cosmic accident. So to answer my original question, I think that the thing isn't here to conquer or take over, but I think that the thing is here just simply to survive and just exist. And we happen to be part of that existence. So, yeah.